Welcome to the Untitled Library Podcast. That's right, episode 1 was so popular that we're back with another. You've already been introduced to Shane and I in episode 1, and today we're lucky enough to get Carrie and Katie to join us. What a coup! Carrie works as a circulation coordinator, and Katie is our newest team member and works as the library systems assistant. Today we're going to discuss the library's game collection, the archive's historic video game collection, and explain how to access them. We'll also talk about reasons academic libraries may maintain gaming collections and consider if it's appropriate or not. Finally, we'll round out the episode with everyone sharing what their favorite games are and why. So thank you all for listening, and please take a moment to like and subscribe. Carrie, can you give us a brief explanation of the game collection the library has?
I would be happy to. So we started with a couple of games in our instructional materials collection, which were more like education classroom-based games, things like the watershed game or pizza party. So things that were really more academically inclined and very much meant to teach specific skills in classrooms. So we started to buy fun games, and it's sort of split into two sections. We have a couple of what we call yard games, so giant Jenga, giant Connect 4, sort of large party sized games, and then that you can like play outside or in a large space. And then we have a board and card game collection that we started to build up in sort of batches. We're still adding to it, but it has a pretty good mix of classic games like Catan and Scrabble and Apples to Apples, and then we also have newer games like Unstable Unicorns, Exploding Kittens, Throw Burrito. I realize that like all of those come from the same game company, but we also have what is it? Haunted Mansion, Haunted something. We have Lamboozled, What Do You Meme, Cards Against Humanity. Some of those card games. Things that are intended for students to play together in party settings, getting to know each other, and just kind of relax together, that you could play like in a dorm or at a house party or something like that.
Which games are more popular? Which games circulate more? The ones in the collection intended for academic purposes, or the ones that are more just for recreation?
The recreational games definitely circulate more. They're a little bit more visible. We have them kind of in a display area, and the educational games are really more geared towards younger children. So the people who check those out are education students or teachers looking to use them in classrooms, whereas our board and card games that are more recreational are geared towards college students who check them out for themselves. So they're more likely to grab them.
Have students been surprised or excited to see that we even have games to be checked out, or is that pretty common and expected from students?
I think they're surprised to find them in the library and that we recommend them so enthusiastically. Even knowing that there are card games and board games in the library, they don't circulate like hotcakes or anything, but it's kind of a pleasant surprise.
Sure.
They stumble upon them and they go, oh, I'm having a party tonight. Some of them might get a little bit nervous. A lot of our games tend to be more card-based or have a lot of small parts. I think that they get nervous about taking them outside the library, but if we lose pieces, it just means the game's getting played. So
Right. I'm curious, Katie, growing up, or even currently, do you check out games from libraries, or have you in the past, or is that even something you've thought about?
It's definitely something I've thought about. Working in a variety of different public libraries, I always get excited when I see the games, but they're always checked out and I forget to put them on hold. And the other disappointing thing is a lot of games require more than 2 people.
Yeah.
And it's hard as a working adult to find time with other people to find people to play. It just makes it really difficult. So it's a lot of games of, okay, well, is this meant for 2 people? And so we actually bought a game that said on the box 2 to 6 people, and we opened the instructions and it said 3 people.
Of course.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting to get kind of a public library perspective. You said they're often checked out, the good ones, so they must circulate a lot out of public libraries, I'm guessing.
I almost never saw them on the shelf.
Okay. As soon as they come in, they're out.
Right. Some of it is because part of the collection was based at, I worked at a large system that had multiple branches, and so part of the collection was based in a different branch, but the branch I worked at was the most popular and the central branch.
Okay.
So it saw a lot of these, and we had some at the central branch. Most of them were housed at a different one, but there were never any that stayed at the central branch long enough to even peruse. It was not something you could peruse.
Yeah.
You had to know what to
you
look
wanted,
for
yeah.
in the catalog, even to search for them, which that made it really difficult. There wasn't any resource that was like, here's a list of all the games or something. So that made it kind of difficult to access them in that respect. And I haven't really seen a good resource from a public library yet on those, because it's really hard to be serendipitous about games, anything really in the library, when it's not there. Obviously, it's popular enough that they're checked out all the time.
So Carrie, that brings up a good question. Do students, are they pulling games that are on display and that they can browse, or are they looking them up in the catalog?
Primarily, they browse them.
Yeah.
Yeah, most students they don't browse our catalog or tend to browse our catalog for leisure items. I think because they're so used to going to our library website and searching for academic books that it doesn't necessarily occur to them to get leisure titles or items from us. I think that a lot of them would use services like Libby or Audible. They're getting their books from other places when they have time for leisure books. And I think it's rare enough that those students who are very motivated to, say, read for leisure during the school year already have books or have resources, or they go out and they buy books. So some do come and find them and they browse, but they don't tend to look in our catalog unless it's something that they're very motivated to find, like a sequel, or something that's brand new that has like 100-person wait line at the public library, and our patron pool is a little smaller, so our queues tend to move faster.
So it seems like students compartmentalize how they do their research. They look at the library catalog for academic resources. Where can they go to look for recreational resources? Is there a better place or different place than the catalog?
So there is, we have a digital resource that's adjacent to the catalog. On our homepage, we have an option called Featured Collections. So it's kind of a rough and ready way to start looking by some of our highlighted subjects. So we have certain collections that are featured for, say, celebratory months or things like that, history celebrations, and also we have feature collections that highlight specific portions of our collection. So we do have a collection that you can click on where you can browse just a list of all of our card and board games. So it is just one click off the homepage, and then you can browse through everything that we have available currently through the catalog. And that's a pretty easy way to digitally browse and place a request if you aren't in the space itself.
Thank you.
Of course.
Let's focus on video games for a little bit. The archive started a video game collection probably 5 years ago. And so over the past 5 years, we've been continually adding to the collection. It's been used in different classes. It's been used for outreach, especially exam cram, I would say is probably the biggest. In our collection, people are very surprised to find out we have a video game collection, I feel. They don't think of an archives as having that. So Shane, actually, I'd like to start with how students are surprised. You've done a lot of tabling at events lately. What are their reactions when you introduce them to our collection?
They seem very excited and surprised, like you said. Students they usually come up with some story from their past about some N64 or SNES or old system that they played when they grew up, and now seeing that like on one of our brochures or knowing that we have that is always exciting for them. we don't get a lot of students coming in to use things recreationally, even though that's something we offer. It's not just for like course use or for special events.
Mm-hmm.
So there's maybe not as much follow-up, and folks are busy, so that makes sense. But it's always a mixture of excitement and surprise to find out we have so many systems.
Yeah, we had a student last semester, I believe, that did academic research on
Yes.
video games.
Yep.
Can you explain their research or what they were looking at, if you remember?
Yeah, I believe the research was focused on violence in video games, specifically the first couple big ones that really got all sorts of people upset about the amount of violence in video games. So the student looked at Doom 64, which is a very violent video game. Also Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, which is a very popular title, but also very violent in a lot of different ways. And then also one of the Mortal Kombat games on the Sega Genesis. And the student came in a couple different days. We had all the TVs and the games set up in our classroom, and they played all the games and then used that experience for their research.
That's great. I mean, that's what the collection was really built for. Outreach is kind of secondary, so it's good that that's being used for that. And I know Kyle puts out video games for the classes for instruction when they come in, so people get an introduction to the collection, gives them the opportunity to brainstorm kind of research ideas. So all of our video games are also in the catalog, but we also have a webpage dedicated to our collection. Can you talk through that real quick?
Yes, with the caveat that by the time this is released, the website will probably look very different.
That's okay.
But
That's okay.
Yeah, ours will too. Feature collections will still be a thing.
Okay.
And the historic video game collection will still have a page, but it'll look a little different. But on there we have a link to the finding aid, which is just archives parlance for basically a list of all the materials in the collection and the scope of the collection and things like that. There'll be a form that we would like all the listeners of this podcast to use to send us a recommendation for a video game we should add to the collection, because I don't think we've received any
No, I don't think so
in
either.
the 5 years that we've had this recommendation page. Because we take requests. We can't guarantee that we'll fill all of them for purchase requests, but it is a growing collection. We receive funds every academic year to add to it, and if any listener has any idea for a game that will fit the scope of the collection, we'll gladly take that into consideration. And then we do have several photos, I believe, on that webpage of the games being used at events, but probably from 2019, so
Yeah.
we should get some new ones.
Probably
on
pre-COVID.
on the new website.
And there's also a page for recent acquisitions.
Yes.
And actually, I just updated that. So everything, we purchase games annually. So we update the page with all the new purchases.
Are students able to check out the games?
So the Cirque video game collection is a non-circulating collection because of the monetary value and the, not irreplaceability, but it's difficult to get some of these games. And like most archives collections, they don't leave the archives then. Occasionally we take them over to the circulation area for events like exam cram or for displays or something of that nature, but they do have to be used in the archives. And students are still welcome to use them just for recreational purposes. If they just want to play Doom 64 for fun with their friends, they can come into the archives and we'll set that up for them, but only during our open hours, unfortunately.
So I'm going to throw this question out there, and whoever wants to jump in can. Why do video games and board games even belong in academic libraries? Is it even appropriate?
A big part of a university setting, particularly like here we are a 4-year comprehensive residential for your first 2 years, games go right to me into that concept of library as third space. This is how you build community. You take a game and you put it out on the table in the library, you bring it back to your dorm and you play with your friends. It's where you get to know each other, where you form those connections. A huge issue that is talked about in the academic community now for undergraduates is the social isolation aspect of leaving and going to college and that struggle to adjust. And games are ways that they tell stories, but they also help us to learn about each other. So I think that the library is a good spot to do that. It's not having to go out to the bars. It's not a place where you need to spend money, which is a really big part of that third space aspect. So it's facilitating that community building, and libraries are community spaces. So I think that's a big part of it. A lot of people think that that's just about public libraries, but I think that that's both. So your academic community and your undergraduate community is super important as well.
And having them available all the time helps build routine engagement as well. That's a distinct memory that I have is my roommate basically stole her brother's Nintendo 64, and the only multiplayer game he had was Mario Party 2 or 3. And so that, we'd routinely gather to play it, and so if with these board games, that's a really easy thing to be like, hey, we're going to go grab a game from the library and play every week or every month or whatever. And it's the whole building friendships is all about being together in a common enough space and in a routine enough format. That's why making friendships as a child is so much easier than as an adult, because you're forced into a room with 20 other kids. And so you just have to get to know them, and in that you build your friendships. And we're losing that a little bit in college because you're meant to go on your own in college, whereas if you continue to do some of those play things that you're used to doing as a kid, that helps maintain that idea of friendship as well.
I don't think recreation should be minimized either. Even if you're not playing these games with friends, you need a release from constant studying, or you will burn out. And a lot of people find relief just by taking an hour or two to play a video game or a board game. Katie, what is your favorite video game or board game? And it doesn't have to be in our library collection. It can be anything.
Well, considering I don't know what is in the collection, I guess I have a couple of favorite video games. I really like games that are storytelling ones. So I'm really into the BioShock games, and just found out that there's a new one they're coming out with potentially, where it's an add-on to BioShock Infinite. I gotta look at that again. And my other one is Ori and the Blind Forest. Absolutely love that game, but be prepared to cry.
I think we have that.
Yeah, and there's a second one.
Yeah.
Ori and the Will of the Wisps.
That's the one we have.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yep, that's the second one.
Okay.
So there's it's a 2-part, and there's some story missing if you don't have the first one.
Oh.
So it's kind of important to know the whole story with that. But I like that one specifically because it had some pretty good ability scaling, because I like playing games more for the story and for something fun to do than because it's something technically easy or difficult to do. So as somebody who doesn't have that coordination built up over the lifetime that some other people have and that kind of thing, I like that there's different modes that you can play it on and get the same level of story. It doesn't change the game, it just makes it a little easier. Like, it gives you a little bit more time to do certain things, or it's, just, it had a really good scaling ability, because some games don't do that easy, difficult, hard thing very well.
Yeah.
And I felt that Ori did, and that's why one of the reasons I enjoyed playing it a lot. It was also one of the first games after BioShock that I streamed and got some good fun response with, and became a little bit of a inside joke on my stream for a little while of squish, or I get squished a lot. Yeah. So
Shane, what's your favorite game?
I suppose in the collection, my favorite game is Saturn Bomberman.
Yeah.
That's a game that, Brad, you and I have been trying to get students interested in at every event, and we've continually failed. It's just a really fun game. The controls are really simple. It's a fun multiplayer game. Anyone can just sit down and play it.
And fast-paced. And
a lot of action
energy
on the screen. Yeah. It's just a lot of fun to play, and maybe it's the system is kind of not one that a lot of folks are used to. The Saturn's kind of like, I know that was a hard one to get because it's a system not everyone knows about, so maybe there's like an intimidation factor there. But we will continue to try to get other folks interested as we are in
because the more people that play it, the more fun it is too.
Yes. Yeah. Someday we'll have to get the multi-tap so we can get like 8 people playing that. But yeah, it's a very fun game.
It's good to have goals.
Highly recommended.
Carrie, do you have a favorite game?
I do. So my favorite video game it's an old PS1 game called Legend of Mana. It's part of a series of games. It's actually like the 4th one in the series, but it was just one that my older sisters saved up money and bought because the cover art was pretty and it sounded really interesting, and they brought it home. And it has a lot of replay value. So like, depending on how you play the game, you build your own map, and that impacts which challenges you can create, what achievements you can unlock, all sorts of things. And then beating the game allows you to start over with, all of your experience and everything. So it's sort of meant to be replayed over and over again, but it is also just so unnecessarily complicated. It is a massive game with like so much stuff in it that is so unnecessary, but also really fascinating. Like every aspect is mechanized. And just the music is gorgeous. All of the art and the backdrops and everything is so pretty to look at. And it's very, like, it's kind of an adventure game where you fight, but it's kind of soothing. And it's not all about sort of the skill, like Katie was talking about. It's more story based, and there's various different sort of story arcs that you can complete. So I bought a Switch just because they re-released it on Switch. And I'm quite happily just continuing to play that same game like I have been for 20 years. That was one where we overheated the PS1 as kids because there's no way you could play this game in a day. It takes weeks, which is really, really fun for me. So I'm a very particular person, but I enjoy other games. It's just that one is my favorite.
So I'm very nostalgic about my games. You've been playing the same game for 20 years and can easily pick it up and play it again. I'm the same way with Super Mario Brothers 3. I could pick that game up any day. It's easy to play. It's fun to play. It's still a challenge. So that is by far my favorite game. I like any game that you can just pick up and play, though, like a racing game or any Mario Brothers game. But there's something about Mario 3 that it was such a jump from the first Super Mario. Like, the gameplay was better. And knowing that I can beat it, that helps me get through it as well. So we're going to go around really fast and talk about favorite board games. And maybe I'll start. My favorite board game, and also the most frustrating and worst board game in many ways, is Monopoly still. It's a classic. It's fun to play, but it's also the most frustrating thing and argument-inducing game in my family, for sure. But it still brings back good memories, and there's nothing better than winning. I mean, you got piles of cash, you got piles of properties, and you get to rub it in everybody else's face. So that's my favorite board game. Shane, do you have one?
That's probably mine as well, but more so when I played it all the time as a kid, and we always played it till the end. Usually on like Christmas morning, we'd after presents and everything, we'd just for some reason play Monopoly until one person had all the money. But I learned, and I won't get into the article right now, so I don't want to put everyone to sleep. But like the history of that game is history of that game is really interesting, and that's part of the reason why it's even more interesting to me now. But we'll leave it at that.
Yeah, we can talk about that later, maybe.
Yeah, possibly.
So board gaming was not much I've been into, but one I really enjoy is Azul. And I've done a bunch of Kickstarters for games, but
I don't know Azul. Can you explain it?
Azul, it's a tile game,
Okay.
and it's kind of based on like the ancient Mesopotamian color tiles. And it's just you're trying to collect them and do different patterns and things like that.
Interesting.
And it's a relatively fast-paced game, but it's still sort of strategy and, you know, a lot of like not quite sabotaging each other, but you're trying to fill out your own card, and if you take certain things, you can make it harder for other people to fill out their cards. So
Okay. Strategy?
yeah. So, but it's relatively quick and pretty easy to teach it.
It's nice when you can pick up on these games. I mean, I've tried playing some. I don't want to rag on the newer games, but some of them.
Some of these new ones.
The instruction books are a novel.
We got one from Kickstarter that it took us 3 hours just to set it up. Set it up. We never actually played the game.
Yeah.
We got so bogged down in the setup and trying to figure out how we were supposed to even start. And there was even an app for it too. And it was just like, what? We were super excited about it because it's like The Martian or something. So it's like based on surviving on Mars.
Oh, neat.
And so like all the different things you would need to, like things that went wrong, and you have to try and fix them and have the resources and all that kind of stuff. And
Yeah, it does sound like fun.
but it would be much better suited, I think, as a video game where certain things are auto-tracked for you versus trying to keep track of them as tiles.
Yeah.
Because it had physical pieces for all of these things.
Oh my gosh. Easy to get confused.
Oh yeah.
Carrie, do you?
The one I enjoy most, probably like as an adult, is actually the Disney villainous games. Because you play as a different villain, and one of my sisters owns like all of the different versions, not all of them, but quite a few. So you can pick and choose who you're playing against, and so it's different every time. And I prefer games that are either strategy and you are trying to fulfill your own goals, or actually collaborative board games. Sorry, Brad.
That's okay.
I know you like to win. So like, I really like something like Forbidden Island, or like when I learned to play in like 2014, it wasn't quite, I hesitate to tell people now, but I really like the board game Pandemic.
Oh yeah.
It's really fun. Yeah. And when I was in high school back in ye old, maybe it was like 2010, I don't know. It was really fun, and it was like a fun new game, and I had never really played collaborative board games before, and I much prefer them.
I feel like board games have really come into their own in the last 5 to 10 years. Like it's really resurged. Yeah. There's tons of videos online about new games and stuff. Back in, I don't know, 90s, 2000s?
Your heyday?
In my heyday. Maybe it was because of my age, but I feel like board games were kind of lame and kind of outdated, and I think that's because we were still playing the board games from the 70s and 80s, right? But now you have these artists creating these new games, and then the games like, I don't know, Exploding Kittens or whatever, like they're hugely popular, and we just didn't have that kind of stuff growing up.
Well, it's that much easier to create games now. And that was actually one of the interesting things about the board game convention that I went to in Canada. There were a lot of new games that were out that they were testing and getting feedback before they went into actual production. So, it's okay, what are confusing about these rules? And you get to try it out before they go to production, but just seeing some of the art and some of the stories that people are coming up with these games, it's kind of like, with there's a little bit more self-publishing kind of happening, and that people get to express themselves. So you're getting a little bit wider now array of ideas and themes and rules and, just ways of playing games. It's not just moving pieces on a board. Right. It's, like the burrito one, throwing things at each other.
Well, there's something to be said for the shift in the marketing. So like when I was a kid, board games were for kids. They were children's games that were meant to be played by, like, you had parents who could help you play the game, help you understand. And then, but they were meant to be played with your kids and by kids. And I don't know if, like, maybe I'm not putting credit in the right spot, but I think Cards Against Humanity really changed the game.
Mm-hmm.
This was a game for grown-ups. You could say sassy words and, be an adult. And like when I was younger, it was you just played apples to apples and you implied things.
Yeah.
I
remember that.
But they started to make and market games that were more complex, that were not as, sometimes frustratingly so, not as kid-friendly. But they were marketing towards people who had the time and the money and who wanted ways to interact with their friends in a little bit more structured way, who were a little bit bored with some of the things that they had access to. And I think they started marketing more towards sort of the video game market, and that opened up a lot of space to create things. They're not, the scaling went up. It didn't have to be accessible to 10 to 12-year-olds.
Right. You could have a game that would need to be played over days. It's kind of like a video game, like you said, in that there's a longer story to it. It doesn't have to last 10 minutes.
Right. It's made for people with a little bit more of an attention span and patience, and who will appreciate all of the beautiful details and art. Not that kids don't like pretty things, but...
Right.
I'd like to thank Shane, Carrie, and Katie for joining me in this conversation. If you're interested in using any games from the collections described, please take time to visit the UWSP Library's website and the UWSP Archives website for more information. Until next time, keep reading, keep exploring, and remember, the library is always open for discovery.